In our last video, we discussed about the digestive system and the process of food getting digested to give us energy. But how do we feel hungry? When our stomach is empty, our body will send signals to the brain and then we will feel hungry. In the same way, when the water content in our body falls below the normal level, our brain will detect that and as a result, we will feel thirsty. This whole controlling, regulatory, and messaging is done by the nervous system in our body. It controls our behavior, response, learning, memory, and thought. Brain is the central part of the nervous system and it also includes the spinal cord and all the nerves that branch off from the spinal cord. Any change that happens inside or outside our body can be termed as a stimulus. Our sense organs will sense that, for example, outside stimuli like temperature and sound, etc., and inside stimuli are the difference in the amount of electrolytes in our body and pressure. We can call them all together as sensory inputs. These sensory inputs travel as electrical signals to our brain and decisions are made in our brain specific to each stimulus. Now the brain sends signals to all parts of the body and instruct how to act in response to a stimulus. We can call these signals as motor outputs. For example, like talking, walking, and even taking a glass of water is the motor activity. The nervous system is divided into two: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system includes all the nerves that are attached to the central nervous system, that is to the brain and spinal cord. Again, this peripheral nervous system is divided into two. One nervous system that controls all the voluntary actions of our body. That means all the activities that are done with our conscious control. It is termed as somatic nervous system. It controls the voluntary movements. Another division that controls the involuntary actions of our body. That means the actions that are done without our conscious control. It is termed as autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is divided into three. Sympathetic nervous system that activates in dangerous or stressful situations. It produces a flight or fight response which we will discuss later on in the autonomous nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system get activated when we are at rest. Enteric nervous system controls the gastrointestinal system that is not referred as often. The nervous system derives its name from nerves. So let's start with the anatomy of nerves. Nerves are bundles of fibers that connect the nervous system with other parts of the body. There are two types of nerves. Motor or efferent nerves. They transmit signals from brain to the body parts, and sensory or afferent nerves that transmit information from body to the brain. Again, these motor nerves can be divided into two. Somatic efferent fibers conduct messages from spinal cord to the skeletal muscles, and visceral efferent fibers are involved in the autonomous nervous system. The sensory or afferent nerves can again be divided into somatic that conduct messages from muscles and joints to the brain, and visceral afferent fibers that conduct messages from organs like heart and digestive system to the brain. There are about 12 cranial nerves that are present in our body. Cranial nerves are nerves that directly emerge from the brain. Nerves are a bundle of fibers that connect the nervous system with other parts of the body. Let's learn about the cranial nerves. First cranial nerve is the olfactory nerve that transmits sensory information of smell from nose to the brain. Second cranial nerve is the optic nerve that sends information regarding vision from eyes to the brain. Third cranial nerve is the oculomotor nerve. It provides motor information from brain to some of the muscles around the eyes so that it can move. It also helps to dilate the pupils in response to light. Trochlear nerves sends information to rest of the muscles around the eyes for downward and outward movement of eyes. Trigeminal nerves is the largest of cranial nerves and it has both sensory and motor functions. It provides sensory information from face to the brain and give motor information from brain to the jaw muscles for biting and chewing. Abducens nerve gives motor information from brain to the muscles around the eyes to look into the sights. Seventh cranial nerve is the facial nerve. It controls muscles of facial expression and gives the sensory information of taste from 2/3 of the tongue. Vestibulocochlear nerve provides sensory information involving hearing and balance. Glossopharyngeal nerves provides motor information from brain to back of the throat and gives sensory information of taste from back part of the tongue. Vagus nerve is responsible for the regulation of the functions such as digestion, heart rate, respiratory rate, and reflex actions such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. Accessory nerve is the 11th nerve. It is a motor nerve that controls the muscles in your neck. 12th cranial nerve is the hypoglossal nerve. It is responsible for the movement of most of the muscles in our tongue. As we are done with the cranial nerves, let's move on to the spinal nerves. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves which are attached to the spinal cord. They are named after the level of spinal cord at which it emerges. For example, cervical nerves, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal nerves. The nervous system comprises two types of cells: neurons and glial cells. Neurons are also called nerve cells. They are specialized cells that transmit information to other nerve cells. They send and receive signals from the brain. Neurons have a cell body which contains the nucleus and the cytoplasm. It is also termed as soma. It has dendrites and axon terminals. Axon is covered with myelin sheath. Myelin sheath are made up of specialized cells called glial cells. They give support to the neurons and hold them in place and supply nutrients to the neurons. The glial cells in central nervous system, that is in brain and spinal cord, is termed as oligodendrocytes. And the glial cells in peripheral nervous system is called as Schwann cells. The contact points where one neuron communicates with another is called synapses. Here is the synapse where the axon terminal of one neuron contact with the dendrites of the another neuron. It is a space between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite of the another neuron. The passage of messages starts from dendrites and it moves down the cell body, then down to the axon, then to axon terminals, and through synapses it reaches the dendrites of another neuron. The information from brain is sent as action potential. Action potential is an electrochemical cascade. These chemicals, when reach the dendrites or cell body of one neuron, it will result in the flow of positively charged ions down the axon. When these positively charged ions reach this axon terminal, they will result in the release of a chemical called neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are present in the vesicles which are present in the axon terminal of one neuron. These neuron transmitters are released into the space between two neurons. That space, as we discussed, it is called as the synapse. And these neurotransmitters reach this synapse. From this synapse, these neurotransmitters get bind to the receptors which are present in the dendrites of another neuron. So these chemicals travel through dendrites down the axon as positively charged ions, and when it reaches the axon terminal, it results in the release of chemicals from the vesicles which are termed as the neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are released to the space between two neurons, which is the synapse, and from this space these neurotransmitters get bind to the receptors which are present in the dendrites of another neuron. Thus the signal is passed. This process of signal transmission is called neurotransmission. There are about 85 to 200 billion neurons present in our brain. Let's now discuss about the central nervous system. There are two major structures in the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. The human brain weighs approximately about 1.4 kilograms. It controls most of the activities in our body. It processes, integrates and coordinates the information it receives from sense organs, and it sends instruction to the rest of the body. Brain consists mainly of three parts: cerebrum, brainstem and cerebellum. The major divisions of the brain are forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. The forebrain consists of two subdivisions called the telencephalon, which contains the cerebrum, and diencephalon, which includes the thalamus and hypothalamus. Midbrain again subdivided into mesencephalon, that contains the midbrain, and hindbrain subdivided into metencephalon, that contain the pons and the cerebellum, and myelencephalon, that contains the medulla oblongata. Cerebrum is the largest and uppermost part of the brain. A longitudinal fissure that divides the cerebrum into two hemispheres. They are called cerebral hemispheres. These hemispheres have a core of myelinated nerve fibers. That means they are covered with myelin sheaths. It is called white matter. Outer cortex area consists of unmyelinated axon containing nerve cells called grey matter. It is present in cerebrum, brainstem, cerebellum and spinal cord. The grey matter is the outside area and white matter is the inside area. The grey matter in cerebral cortex has mainly four lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal and occipital. Frontal lobe controls motor activities and speech. Parietal lobe controls touch and position of our body. Temporal lobe controls the auditory reception, that is hearing and memory. Occipital lobe controls the visual reception. There is a large C-shaped nerve fiber bundle that connects the both hemispheres of the cerebrum. It is termed as corpus callosum. Corpus callosum allows us to perceive depth and enables the two sides of our brain to communicate. It allows the integration of sensory input and functional responses from both sides of the body. White matter connects various grey matter areas of the brain to each other. It carries nerve impulses between neurons. Through the white matter, messages pass between different areas of grey matter. The myelin sheath present in the nerves in white matter allow the messages to pass quickly from place to place. Cerebrum has many functions, like it controls muscular activities, self-movement, hearing, vision And cerebrum controls most of the intellectual functions of our body like judgment, problem solving, and cerebrum has a role in controlling the emotions. Thalamus is a large mass of gray matter. It is located in the dorsal part of the diencephalon. Nerve fibers project out from the thalamus to the cerebral cortex in all directions to exchange information. Thalamus is known for its activity in vision, hearing, somatosensory, that is a sensation such as pressure, pain, or warmth. Gustatory system is responsible for the perception of taste and flavor. Thalamus has a role in memory, sleep-wake cycle, consciousness, and alertness. Hypothalamus lies below the thalamus. It is a small cone-shaped structure that projects downward from the brain, ending the pituitary stalk. The hypothalamus contains a control center for many functions of autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system controls and regulates the unconscious bodily functions such as heart rate, pupillary response, digestion, etc. It has effects on endocrine system because of its complex interaction with the pituitary gland, which is present just below the hypothalamus. Endocrine system regulates the release of hormones in our body. Hypothalamus has many functions like it releases hormones, it regulates the temperature and blood pressure in our body, it has a role in hunger, thirst and sleep-wake cycle. Brainstem is divided into three sections: midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata. Pons lies just above the medulla oblongata and cerebellum. It is a pathway for the nerves that connect cerebral cortex and cerebellum. It plays a critical role in breathing. Other functions of pons are it involves in swallowing, bladder control, hearing, and it controls the eye movement, taste, facial expression, and it has a role in sensation and posture. Medulla oblongata is the lowest portion of the brain. It is involved in the regulation of cardiac functions, vasodilation, that is the widening of blood vessels, and reflex actions such as vomiting, coughing, sneezing, swallowing. Cerebellum lies just above the medulla oblongata and it contains nearly 50% of all the nerve fibers which is present in the brain. This cerebellum coordinates posture, balance, and it has a role in speech. As we are done with the structure of brain, let's move on to the spinal cord. Spinal cord extends from the base of the brain. It is composed of nerve fibers that mediate reflex actions. They transmit impulses to and from the brain. Reflex actions are unconscious or involuntary response to a stimulus. For example, if you touch a hot pan, immediately you will withdraw your hand, right? Here the heat is the stimulus and the nerves bring this information to the spinal cord and it will send an immediate response to withdraw the hand. These kinds of actions are called reflex actions. Spinal cord is situated inside the vertebral canal of the vertebral column. Each vertebra has two cylinder-shaped projections called the pedicle, which is made of hard bone and it provides protections for the spinal cord and nerves. Discs are spongy cushions that separate the bones of the vertebra and act as a shock absorber. The spinal cord is divided into different segments like cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal vertebrae. There are 8 pairs of cervical nerves, 12 pairs of thoracic, 5 pairs of lumbar, 5 pairs of sacral, and 1 pair of coccygeal spinal nerves. It is a total of 31 pairs. If we take a cross section of the spinal cord, this is a cross section of spinal cord. Here we can see an H-shaped area. This H-shaped area is the gray matter and this is the white matter. Gray matter is present inside and white matter is outside. But in brain, gray matter is outside and white matter is inside. When sensory nerve fibers reach the spinal cord, they are like bundles in the white matter. They are termed as nerve tracts. There are ascending tracts that convey information from the spinal cord to the brain and descending tracts that convey information from brain to the spinal cord. Meninges is a three-membranous envelope. It surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. The innermost layer is the pia mater. This is the pia mater. It firmly adheres to the surface of the brain and spinal cord. It is a thin layer composed of fibrous tissue. The blood vessels going to the brain and spinal cord passes through this layer. Second layer is the arachnoid matter. There is a space between pia mater and arachnoid matter. It is termed as subarachnoid space. Arachnoid membrane is transparent and made up of fibrous tissues like pia mater. Arachnoid layer has small protrusions called villi. These are villi from arachnoid layer. And they act as a one-way valve for the flow of cerebrospinal fluid into the veins. The outermost layer is called the dura mater. It is a thick, strong membrane. It is made up of dense fibrous tissue. And outside that, there is the skull and the outer layer is the skin. The meninges protects and support central nervous system. Cerebrospinal fluid is a colorless liquid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through this subarachnoid space that is between the arachnoid layer and the pia mater. Around 100 to 150 ml of cerebrospinal fluid is there in normal adult's body. It provides lubrication between the bones and the brain and the bones and the spinal cord. It maintains the pressure at constant level. It removes the waste materials and disease-causing pathogens away from the brain and spinal cord into the bloodstream. It acts as a shock absorber. If you accidentally get a fall or some kind of injury to heart or vertebral column, the cerebrospinal fluid acts as a cushion and it protects the spinal cord and the brain. That's it about the central nervous system. Our next video will be on peripheral nervous system. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. If you have any queries, put it in the comment box. Thank you.